Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. We're going to be talking about the Xbox. More specifically, a supposed follow-up for the Xbox known as the Xbox Next. Supposedly, an industry insider by the name of X-Rays has leaked some information concerning the system and believes that it's going to have 5 to 6 times the performance of the PlayStation 4 Neo, which means a hell of a lot of performance, as we'll get into in just a second. Now, I'm somewhat skeptical of this rumour, and I wasn't initially going to cover it, but a couple of folks have contacted me via Twitter, and they've contacted me via, well, pretty much every method under the sun, actually, and wanted to know my take on this. So, I'm giving my take on it. Also, just to get it out there, I'm recording in a bit of a different setting than normal. Essentially, I'm having some work done at my home, and so I've had to move loads of equipment around. Recording equipment is not where it normally is. I've got basically a bed in front of my computer desk, which is definitely not how it's supposed to be. And so it's just absolutely crazy. So if I sound a bit off, we hear squeaking or creaking, really sorry, but basically furniture is everywhere at the moment because heating systems are being changed. So it's a bit of a thing. Anyway, getting into the quote. So it's kind of a lengthy one, but I want to get it out there. I'm going to read it all out to you. I've got some slides from Microsoft and AMD about the new Xbox, and it is in effect a new model, not a remake of one. They should announce this year at a separate event from E3, but still a few days before the affair. The announcement will be made this year, but the release of the Xbox Next is not expected before next spring. To read the roadmap, it will be an open to change the hardware. I do not fully understand if via upgrade, or they spoke of some changes that will operate on the fly before release. It will be extremely powerful from the start. I think about 5 to 6 times PS4 Neo. By the way, these quotes are somewhat iffy because they're from translation from Italian, if memory serves. 5 or 6 times that of a PS4 Neo, then something in the order of about 10 T-flops or so. I can guarantee the next Xbox One is in pre-production. AMD have signed 3 new agreements this year and 1 last. What the past year concerned for the tax of the slimline model of 1 SoC. What this year is the big 3 industry, including Microsoft for the new console. There are 4 agreements, 3 only for 2016. 1 will be a definite step forward as a chipset. Still, it's not been exploited even at 80%, and there is still room for improvement to get more from the current consoles. But talking with Xbox team developers has noticed too much focus on innovation and less on strength. Then I can tell you that even at a cross between 1 and a Stark PC, if we count the numbers, I mean that everything will be balanced as a current one, but each element will be provided with the great power, starting from the system at integrated HBM DDR4 in GPU. There will be an exhaust chip, but for the lazy dev you can bet the computational power without incurring large compromises. The opposite situation of 1. Panos Panay is overseeing the project and the aesthetics of the console, and I think it will be amazing. That is the end of the quote. Apart from to say that the chip is supposedly based on Arctic Islands of AMD 14nm FinFET process or Polaris 11 Vega. GCN 4.0 in production this summer, will be custom class x86-64 and will always be backwards compatible with 360 with 1. In fact, the operating system will always be virtualized. Windows 10 Redstone 2 is the core of operating system of choice and will be sold at a loss. Those 2 years are working almost immediately after the arrival of 1 end bloody lengthy ass quote. So, from what I'm hearing, some people have already started to post this on all the regular websites, and I've got some problems with this. A lot of this is triggering me. My timbers are being triggered. So, first of all, some specifications we know, alright? So, the Neo is about 4 T-flops. It's 4.2 for the ones who really want exact figures, but let's, for the sake of this video, just use arbitrary figures, rough figures, and just say it's 4 T-flops. If you take 5 and you times it by 4, I'm not the greatest at maths, right? But that doesn't work. It doesn't quite work. If you say 6 times, which is obviously a higher number, that definitely doesn't work. You're looking roughly at their basically telling you that you've got a 20 T-flop GPU inside the system. That is bonkers. That is faster, considerably faster, than a, let's say, a 980 Ti. Hell, to put this into an even more accurate perspective, you remember the new graphics card that AMD have just released, the dual graphics card, the Radeon Pro Duo. That is 16 T-flops. Now, I'm going to let you pause the video, check the pricing of that, and come from there. I don't care what amount of die shrinking they do. I don't care about the efficiencies of 14nm. I don't care if Microsoft are happy to sell at a loss. You would quite literally be costing them so much money per Xbox sold. It's ridiculous. Now, the phrasing of so many things is really going through my mind right now. Right, let's talk about the DDR4 HBM. So, first of all, with DDR4, you could take this a couple of ways, but I'm going to make the assumption that they are referring to the fact that the DDR4 memory and the HBM memory are going to work. I guess the best way of describing it would be like the ESRAM / the DDR3 of the current Xbox One. To give you a really, really brief synopsis on how this works, I've done this very in-depth before with the Xbox One SDK breakdowns and analysis. I'd suggest you check them out if you've got a lot of time on your hands, but suffice to say, it basically means that the GPU writes directly to the HBM memory, and the GPU and the CPU can access the DDR4 memory, and essentially you can have the GPU access that memory, the DDR4 memory, and perform compute commands if the CPU decides, hey, I need you to work on this piece of memory. So that's one way to go. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that if this is even slightly accurate, because there's two possibilities here, excuse me. The first is they didn't actually mean Neo, and they just meant regular PS4, which case about 10 T-flops is fine. If you say between 5 and 6 times that of the original PS4, that's fine. Even so, that's a lot of performance, and you're really going to be in the HBM2 type of territory here. Another problem that I've got is Polaris 11 Vega. That doesn't quite make sense because, well, Vega is known as Vega 10 rather than Polaris 11 Vega. In fact, from what we understand, Polaris is literally just the code name. If you want more information on that, you could check out my interview with Robert Halleck from AMD, where you heard it from the horse's mouth. And so Vega is going to be a HBM2 based GPU, which once again leads credence to the fact that if this is the case, you're going to be looking at HBM2. Now, this means theoretically, I guess Vega could be ready for the time of the Xbox. But overall, it sounds like, from what I'm reading of this, excuse me, hiccups, you know, just reading over this, it sounds like there's a hell of a lot of buzzwords that were just thrown together. Now, can I categorically say that this is not the case? No. But from what I'm reading between the lines here, it seems like the person is insinuating that there are a couple of GPUs in the same console. So, essentially you're going to have one, which I'm going to assume is going to be the SoC, and then I'm assuming they're going to have a secondary GPU, which is kind of how it sounds like. I mean, once again, this is being translated from Italian, so perhaps some of the subtleties of this are being lost. But it sounds like there's going to be one main GPU and a secondary GPU, which could be farmed out. Therefore, they're saying that the first GPU is going to be very powerful, the second GPU not so, was also very powerful, but you don't need to worry about separating it too much because, you know, one GPU is really powerful anyway. it's just a bit of a weird mangle of specifications, and it's going to be way too expensive for customer level. I mean, if I was pricing this, you've got a GPU which is about, let's say, just round it up and say it's 20 T-flops. You're looking at, you know, maybe even if they're taking this thing at a loss, it's going to cost them so much money. Even if you take into account the fact that they're obviously buying it in bulk and all of this. I mean, obviously it depends on the CPU, the memory, and all the other components in there, but I mean, the market tolerance, let's say the market could even tolerate it at like $400, $500 roughly. You might be able to maybe get people to spend that amount on a system. Well, then you're looking at like a $500, $600, $700, $800 loss. I mean, once again, a lot of that does depend what's inside the system. For example, the CPU, how much memory it's got, the optional components. If, for example, is it going to be bundled with Kinect or some other gimmick? Is it going to have an SSD, and if so, what size? And you get the idea, but still, it's going to be ridiculous. I don't think Microsoft would want to lose that much money. Now, one possibility is they could be just going to call it the Xbox PC, but you don't really need to do that, because, I mean, unless they're going like a Steam machine route, possibly, maybe, but I don't know how many people are just going to want a pre-built Xbox box. A lot of folks just, I mean, even the Steam machines haven't done that well. I guess the one thing I could say about Microsoft, though, is they do have, of course, Windows. And let's face it, if you're going to be locked into an ecosystem, if you're so desiring to do that, it's not a bad idea to be locked into a Windows ecosystem, is it? I mean, obviously I can't tell you that this is 100% bullshit, because I don't know. I'm not working at Microsoft, therefore it would be unethical for me to say that this is 100% bullshit, because I don't work there. I don't know if, you know, Bob or, you know, anyone at the, you know, offices is really telling this guy this is accurate, this is what they're working on, because it would be disingenuous for me to claim that. Some of the stuff he has said is quite accurate. For example, the fact they've got 3 announcements AMD this year, that's 100% known. Lisa Su, the president, the CEO over at AMD, has confirmed that during an investor conference. We don't know, by the way, what those chips are for. So just for clarity, there's actually 4 possible uses. One is the Neo, so that by possible use is certain. The NX, the Xbox, and Apple. Apple, I believe it was a Macintosh, but basically there were 4 potential customers that we know of for AMD's 3 chips. That's assuming, once again, last year it didn't slip under the radar. Lisa Su, unsurprisingly, didn't want to piss people off. In other words, her customers, the ones who are actually buying the chips from them, not us. That would be the Microsoft, that would be the Sonys, and they did not want to say, hey, by the way, we're selling this stuff to Sony that's going to be the PS4 Neo, for obvious reasons. With all of that said, we know a couple of things with Microsoft, and this is where I start to reverse gear a little bit and say that I'm 100% sure that Microsoft are putting something together. Whether they're going to announce the Xbox Slim at E3, I'm pretty confident they will. I'm not saying they definitely will, but I would not be surprised. Are they going to be working on another Xbox? Yeah, I think so. I think the Xbox One successor may debut this year, it may slip to next year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's next year. They don't necessarily have to release it this year. It's not like the sales are that bad. They've got the PC market as well. They've still got a couple of pretty down good, well, let's say scale-bound first-party games coming out. They've got still third-party developer support. They've got Windows, which is doing pretty darn well in terms of the PC space. So they're not in a bad situation. They can afford to wait another 12, 18 months if they so desire. And I'm convinced they will release another Xbox successor, and I'm convinced that that sucker is going to be powerful. And I would not be surprised if it bitch slaps the PS4 Neo. Why? Because if it's released later and they've got access to the same technology, it doesn't make sense for it not to, assuming they're not going in a later, or rather lower price point. There we go, I got there in the end. Moreover, so Sony have a VR solution. We know Nintendo might have a VR solution. We don't know what they're doing. They have the secondary screen thing, which is something. I don't know if that's going to carry over for NX. Some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Other people say that it gives you a blowjob as you're playing. I don't know. But with the Xbox, who the hell knows what they're going to be doing? I mean, we know about HoloLens, so maybe they're going to want more power for the HoloLens. And we've only really seen the HoloLens hinted at. We don't really know what the HoloLens is completely capable of. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also wanted a virtual reality solution. I mean, let's just be honest here. You might not personally like virtual reality, but VR is kind of a thing, and it's not going anywhere. VR, the market, is really big right now. And your guess is as good as mine where this is going to go. My personal feelings, however, is this is a load of rubbish. That's my personal feelings. Because the figures just do not make sense. Because they're contradicting themselves immediately within the first few lines. They've said very powerful from the start, I think 5 or 6 times that of the PS4 Neo, then something in the order of over 10 T-flops or so. That just doesn't make sense, because once again, we know from so many different leaks, from so many developers, the PS4 Neo is A, happening, and B, it's about 4 to 4.2 T-flops of computing power. We know the number of shade it has, 2,304. We know the clock speed it's running at, about 913 megahertz. We know that there are 2 operations per shader that the thing can handle per clock. Therefore, all you have to do is take 2,304 times by 2 times by the clock speed. Bob's your uncle. That is the T-flop performance of the PS4 Neo. So, what the Xbox is, I don't know. I believe 100% that the next Xbox will be x86-64. Jesus, you can tell I've just come back from a long day at work. And of course it's going to have a Windows-based core because, well, that makes sense. Of course it's going to be virtualized because that also makes sense. It's how Microsoft did it with the Xbox One. We've seen many different leaks. We've seen SDK leak. We've seen even Microsoft themselves have admitted it during, I believe it was a build conference. I want to say 2014. I'm pretty sure I did an analysis of that conference, actually. So yeah, I don't believe this for a second. I'm not going to go on record and say it's definitely not happening, because I do not have industry inside information inside Microsoft. Therefore, I cannot categorically tell you it is not happening. My personal opinion is these specifications are way too high. If they were going to sell the system at a loss for next year, 8 T-flops, I would believe. If they were to say, yeah, I'm going to go and release the next Xbox at 6 to 8 T-flops, I actually, and I'm not even joking, a couple of days ago I was actually just checking while I was traveling. I was just typing in different configurations based upon what we know about the Polaris architecture and just trying to figure out, with fairly conservative clock speeds, what they could get out of Polaris. And yeah, they could get 6 T-flops quite easily. They could get 7-ish T-flops, depending on the number of compute units and how aggressive they wanted to clock it. The more compute units they need enabled, the higher the clocks they need, the fewer chips they're going to have based upon yields, which is pretty obvious, which means it's going to cost them more money per chip. So if they're willing to take some losses, if they're willing to cough up enough money, they could easily get, you know, a pretty decent performance. I mean, if they go with all 40, they had, like, let's say, for sake of argument, a clock speed of like 1,050 megahertz, which is still way under what Polaris is supposedly capable of, then, you know, they can start really cranking it up there. And if they were to say that they're going to go for a 6 T-flop, 7 T-flop GPU, I could 100% get behind that, especially if it's not going to be released till next year, where once again Vega is a potential possibility. But to say it's 5-6 times out of the Neo, the only thing I can think of is they either screwed up with the Neo and they didn't realise how powerful the Neo was, or they were thinking of something completely different, but based upon what we're hearing here, it's not accurate. My gut feeling is Microsoft are releasing a new system. They are good at releasing the Slimline, in my opinion, because it makes a lot of sense for them to do this. And it goes really hand in hand with a lot of rumours we've heard from a lot of other industry insiders, which actually have some credence, for example, Ferret. But, you know, we'll have to just wait and see, won't we? As usual, subscribe if you want more information, if you want to, you know, hold my hand, dear friends, as we go into the breach known as E3. I tell you one thing about E3 before I let you go, and this is my opinion. It's going to be a friggin' weird E3. Because no matter what turns out to be true, no matter what turns out to be lies, no matter what turns out to be fact, no matter what games we see unveiled, no matter what hardware is unleashed, it's going to be the most weird E3 in a long time. Because it's going to be either a lot of disappointment or it's going to be so much excitement, I'm genuinely worried the internet will explode. So, yeah. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.